All right. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the new data incident process, which I think we've actually only run one time, but we want to do a lot more of. So next slide. I think the hardest problem here is just understanding like what is an incident. We have all kinds of ways of handling bugs and things that go wrong and getting work done and resolving, problems and moving forward. Incident is really kind of something different, and I think I'm still working on what the definition of an incident is, which is why I put draft on this slide. But I think this is intuition we're going to build over time. As we do more of these, we'll understand when to use this and when not to use this. But as a rough back of the napkin kind of thing, I think this is useful for when something is a live issue that needs to be resolved. So not something totally retrospective in the past where we may already understand it. Something where if action isn't taken, it's going to continue or get worse. Where you have stakeholders outside of the data org that deeply care about the incident rather than something that really is kind of internal to the data org that shouldn't have an impact outside of it. Also something, if it's not going to resolve quickly within a day or two and we are likely to have effective data that can't be corrected retroactively. And also it's designed to help with collaboration with teams outside of the data org. So maybe we need to bring in product engineers or other product stakeholders to help us resolve the issue. This is kind of a way of like tying that immediate cross-functional work together. So all of this is up for change, and if you have feedback on it, please let me know. So next slide. The goals of this process, we just want to have kind of like the minimum viable kind of standardization so that stakeholders know if they need to be tracking an issue and understand, or tracking an incident and understanding what its current status is, where it's going, what we know, that it's standardized enough that they know exactly how to find that, and they don't have to like hunt someone down in Slack and not know exactly who the right person to ask is. We want to have one place where stakeholders can go and understand what's happening and how much progress we've made and where it currently stands. It's also a way to see things through across the finish line. Oftentimes we do have these weird things that we discover, we learn a lot about them, but then there are a few steps that we should always do to kind of close it off and make it feel like we've either, we either are able to correct it and move on or decided not to correct it and move on. But either way, we should be closing the loop, both with communication and what we're doing. And then all of this is to the end goal of like increasing confidence in the data org externally through being more transparent. So like providing a channel that people can have insight into what we're doing and working on these incidents, in order to just increase their confidence that yes, things go wrong in data, but they are being worked on by a bunch of very capable people who are doing a great job. So next slide. There are some non-goals, just to be clear. This is not intended to replace Bugzilla or Jira or GitHub for tracking work. When I say that out loud, it makes me clear that adding a fourth thing for that would be a really bad idea. So this is not about actually tracking the work. It's about managing an incident, which ultimately will lead to some work, which will be in one of those other tools, as we've always done. And it's not to replace any sort of permanent ways that we have to discover known data issues. We have the notable historic events page in DTMO. We have Glean dictionary annotations that we should be using more of going forward. There's probably some more work that could be done as a place to discover known data issues as you go in and start using data. This is not really intended to be that. I don't think it's part of that story. It's related, but that's not really the hole we're trying to plug here. So next slide. You decide that you have an incident. What do? You go to the data incident process page in Mana where all of the instructions are, and it's designed to kind of walk you through step by step, make it easy. Next slide. The first step is to just identify who the people are that need to be involved in the incident. So number one, there's an incident commander. I think right now we're taking the position that pretty much anybody can be an incident commander. The instructions are there, they're easy to follow. And anyone can also seek out their manager's help with an incident and feedback and whatever. But I think this is something that pretty much anybody could do. Um, and then you identify the set of incident researchers. So this would be people within the data org that are going to help uh, triage and understand what's going on. It might also include engineers and other stakeholders outside of the data org if they need to get involved. And then lastly, the set of informed people. So you want to identify which products are affected, who are the product managers of those products that need that need to be informed at each step of the way. Again, managers often have the context about who is most likely to care about certain things, so by all means reach out and helping to identify that group of people. And if this can change as the incident develops and you learn more, you can add more stakeholders or take them off. So next slide. Once you've identified the people, it's just a sort of 5-step process to move the incident along. So the step one is notification that we are kicking off an incident. So bunch of things happen at this stage. You make a Jira ticket for the incident. You create an incident report from a Google Doc template. I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. You make a public Slack channel. And then if you need one, you can also make a private Slack channel. Sometimes it's nice to have a space where you can hypothesize things in public or sorry, in private without, worrying about creating a lot of concern, so you may need a private channel as well. You add it to the data incident index, and then you report them in the incident Slack channel, which is a company-wide Slack channel for all incidents. And you also notify all the stakeholders by email. So that's just like, hey, we've created this thing, letting everyone know. Next step, next slide. Oh, sorry, this is the incident report template. It has a bunch of fields to fill in, for the history of the incident, who's the various participants and roles, as well as what's affected. Again, it's just meant to be very self-explanatory. You go through and you start filling this in. Importantly, and the reason we're using a Google Doc rather than something like a Jira ticket for this is a living document of the best understanding at any given time. So it should always have a summary of what we know, and that gets continuously updated as our understanding improves. So rather than a long conversation that someone would have to leap into and sort out, this is like always the short summary of what's going on. So next slide. All of this happens during the research phase. So the incident researchers develop more clarity around the scope and think about potential fixes and mitigations. The commander is the one who's responsible for keeping that report up to date. At this point, you would propose specific resolutions, but you may not, you're not necessarily working on them yet. You're just trying to like gain a better understanding of what would be involved in getting the incident resolved. And then the commander keeps the stakeholders updated whenever there's a major bit of progress that's been made. Some incidents are really hard to resolve and they go on a long time. And so a goal here is to like always have at least a weekly update, if not more often, to the stakeholders so that they know that progress is still being made. Next slide. Once we're comfortable that we know everything we need to know to move on, and that's probably extremely incident specific, what that point would be, you move on to the resolution phase. This means that the immediate resolutions are being worked on. They may not have been shipped yet, but they're being worked on. There's an entry in notable historic events, if that's appropriate for the incident. There's information about it in the Glean dictionary. So the affected metrics or the affected products would get entries in the Glean dictionary annotations system. And then next slide. Once things kind of wind down, the immediate that you enter this phase where the short and medium term resolutions are basically complete, and if necessary, if there's still sort of additional learnings that would be helpful in retrospect, you can hold a blameless retrospective. The incident report becomes a really nice artifact going into that because it should have a timeline of what was known when. The retrospective can help identify sort of more long-term resolutions that would help incidents of this same type from occurring in the future, potentially. Next slide. And then lastly, when all of these steps are complete, you mark it as closed, you close the Slack channels, close the ticket, everyone gets informed again, and we have this nice sort of point at which it gets tied off. Yeah, next slide. And then for additional context, this incident process was an attempt to get something rolled out fairly quickly so we would have something to use now. There is a larger effort going on across the whole company called the Firefox Revised Incident Process. I'm attending those meetings and Sue Ann is there, and there was a round of feedback from some people in this org already about that. The idea is to standardize this more across the company, but then also keep data specific parts of that process included in it. So that's where we're headed. So what I talked about today eventually will get replaced by this new thing. But they're pretty aligned already. I sort of designed this process based on the existing Firefox one. So it shouldn't be too hard to move from one to the other. But I also didn't want to wait on a big company-wide effort and not have something in the meantime. So next slide, I think, is just questions.